I will never forget that awful night when I was home alone after midnight. The moon hung low in the sky, casting strange shadows around my room. I just tried to close my eyes, but the universe had other plans for me. As I was laying in bed, I heard a strange noise from my neighbor's house a few steps away. It was a sound that made my heart pound and my spine shiver. Curiosity consumed me, and I couldn't ignore this disturbing sound. I crawled out of bed as to not alert my dog Rocky, who was laying next to me. I tiptoed toward the window, trying to be silent with every step. What I saw from that window will forever remain in my dreams. There, in the dim light of a nearby lantern, I saw two shadowy figures outside my neighbor's house. They fumbled with two big, ugly black bags. Panic gripped me as I tried my best to get a better view. Who were these intruders, and what did they do with the bag? Every time I saw her, my stomach told me something terrible was happening. I couldn't recognize their faces, but their actions spoke books. They weren't supposed to be there, and they weren't leaving any housewarming gifts. Terrified and unsure of what to do, I grabbed my phone and, with trembling fingers, dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was my lifeline at the time, my connection to reality, even in the midst of the fear. I whispered my address, asked for help, and pointed out a strange sight happening next door. I took a few pictures and videos just to be sure. If they got everything out in time, I could still make sure they didn't get away with it. The minutes felt like hours, and I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. I saw two dark figures with black bags that were getting heavier and heavier coming into my neighbor's house. What did they bring? Why did they choose this unclean time for the evil things they had in their minds? It felt like forever before the sound of sirens filled the night air. The police arrived in time. Blue and red lights bathed the neighborhood in surreal hues as the police searched my neighbor's property. I shook his hand, pointed to the house, and showed what I had seen with the pictures. The police approached the house cautiously, looking dejected and bracing for the worst. The lights flickered across the stage, their rays cutting through the darkness. I realized this wasn't a late-night gardening project or neighborhood get-together. My heart pounded as I prayed that these two people would be released as soon as possible. A few minutes later, the police removed two handcuffed people from the neighboring house. My stomach turned when I recognized her as the figure I had seen in the window. They were real people, not figments of my imagination. The black bag, now involuntarily opened, revealed a lot of stolen items, electronics, and all sorts of other things. The police arrested my neighbors and revealed their secret life of robberies. As a result, they managed to abandon the robbery and chose their own house to hide the loot. It was a bold and strange choice that would have gone unnoticed if it weren't for my insomnia and Rocky's overprotective tendencies. Over the next few days, I learned more about my seemingly ordinary neighbors. Their ordinary exterior hides a terrifying double life. I couldn't shake the terrible feeling that I was with people who were vulnerable to such deception. I soon left, unable to shake the paranoia that there might be some complicity or grudge against anyone who witnessed their actions. I felt good but also bad that I betrayed them to the police. The question now is whether they will come after me and may want to do something to me. I will be in terror for a while, but hopefully it will blow over. Moving to a new neighborhood is always a mixture of excitement and anxiety. It is full of the excitement of new beginnings, the promise of a better life, and the fear of the unknown. Little did we know that our new home would have neighbors who would redefine the term creepy. It was a Saturday. My daughter Lily was very excited to have a new playground outside our house. She was an energetic child who always wanted to explore her surroundings. I looked out the window at her, Thankfully, she was safe in the warm arms of our cozy neighborhood. A few minutes later, I went back to my business, and every now and then I looked at her through the window. But a wave of panic overcame me when I realized I couldn't see her anymore. I ran to the window to check the playground, but she was nowhere to be found. My heart was pounding and fear was forming in my stomach. Without hesitation, I opened the front door and ran out. My voice called out to Lily. The once cozy playground was now a scary maze where every tree and swing hid my precious daughter. The minutes felt like hours. Anxiety was consuming me and making it difficult to think clearly. Then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, despair began to wash over me. Just as I was about to give up hope, I heard her small, innocent voice from next door. The panic gave way to a wave of relief, but only for a moment, as our neighbors knew Mr. Collins as a strange and creepy person in their neighborhood. I approached his house. There was a tense feeling in me. The eerie atmosphere of lush gardens and peeling paint didn't ease my anxiety. I knocked on the door with a shaking fist. I expected that the door would open and reveal a scene from a horror movie. It didn't happen, but the discomfort grew. The door slowly opened with a creak, and there stood Mr. Collins with matted hair and bright eyes. He always irritated me, but seeing him now confirmed my suspicions. A crooked smile appeared on his face as he invited me inside.
"Is there something wrong, Mr. Anderson?"
he asked. His voice was hauntingly sweet. I did not answer. My eyes wandered around the room looking for my daughter. Then I heard it again. Her laughter came from deep inside the house. Panicking, I pushed Mr. Collins away and pushed myself in the direction of the laughter. What I discovered sent shivers down my spine. Lily was sitting at the table, her eyes fixed innocently on a board game, but she looked uncomfortable, like she was playing against her will. Mr. Collins stood beside her with a playful look in his eyes. I held Lily in my arms, her small body trembled.
"What are you doing with my daughter?"
I asked. My voice was shaking with anger. Mr. Collins was very calm.
"We were just playing a game, that's all."
I didn't buy it. Lily hugged me and whispered,
"Dad, I want to go home."
Her voice sounded terrified. I grabbed her hand and backed away quickly. The presence of a restless neighbor followed us like a ghost. When I got home, I locked the door and sat with Lily, trying to figure out what happened. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. What kind of person would invite a neighbor's child into their home without permission? Why did Lily feel uncomfortable playing this board game? I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Collins had an ulterior motive. From that day on, I decided to keep a close eye on Lily and make sure she never came near my neighbor's house, but the feeling of anxiety passed like a shadow that refused to subside. I wonder if Mr. Collins was a strange man, or if there was something darker beneath his sinister exterior. I never contacted him, and over time, Lily's fears disappeared. But as I remember that day, I remembered that sometimes monsters do not hide under the bed, but right next to it, like ordinary neighbors. I didn't think I was part of terrible history, but sometimes when I expect the slightest expectation of life, when my life is the youngest, it returns. It started on a cold night. I was at home watching TV when I heard a blood-curdling scream come from the house of my neighbor, Mr. Jenkins. Now, Mr. Jenkins had become a loner who rarely left his house, but no one deserves such stress. His scream cut through the buttery silence of the night. I jumped up, heart pounding, and ran to his house without a second thought. The front door of his house was slightly ajar, and the front porch light flickered ominously. When I opened the door, I got goosebumps, and adrenaline shot through my veins. The house was in darkness, but another scream came from inside. My hands were shaking, so I picked up the phone, went inside, and called 911. The dispatcher's voice was faint and distant as I whispered the address. I returned to the tortured cry and continued the corridor that was not explained well and modernized from the wall. My heart was pounding and I was short of breath. What happened here? I thought. I just wanted to have my phone with me for protection. At last I arrived in Mr. Jenkins' living room, where the man was bound to a chair, his face contorted with terror. A masked man stood over him. He was one of those creepy, expressionless men you see in scary movies. He mumbled something I couldn't understand. My blood ran cold when I saw the masked assailants were trying to kidnap Mr. Jenkins. I worked up the courage to whisper into my phone.
Please send help, quick. Someone is in the house.
I grabbed my phone and scanned the room for anything I could use as a weapon. My eyes rested on a heavy vase sitting on a nearby shelf. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I took it and prayed it wouldn't be used. The masked man turned his back on me and continued muttering scary things. I gripped the vase tighter until my fingers turned white. Mr. Jenkins looked me fearfully in the eye, but could say nothing. I gathered my courage and approached the man. Sweat was running down my forehead and my heart felt like it was going to burst. But I couldn't let this man take Mr. Jenkins without a fight. As I raised the vase, ready to attack, the attacker turned and made eye contact with me. I froze in fear of him cutting my stomach. The man attacked me and the vase fell on his shoulder. He dropped Mr. Jenkins and screamed inside. I didn't waste a second. I swung the vase again, this time aiming for his masked head. There was a sickening thud, and the assailant fell to the ground, unconscious. Adrenaline shot through me as I ran to free Mr. Jenkins. As I tried to free him, his weak hands shook, and he continued to thank me.
You saved me.
He said. The voice was hoarse from screaming. I helped Mr. Jenkins to his feet, and when I heard sirens in the distance, I approached in a flash. The police arrived and arrested the masked man. He was known to be violent and had been stalking Mr. Jenkins for several weeks. The relief that came over me was enormous. I never dreamed I'd be the main character in the horror story next door, but sometimes you discover courage you didn't know you had. Mr. Jenkins and I survived that night with our lives intact and our relationships renewed. I couldn't help but cringe as the police dragged the stranger away. I walked quickly back into my house before the intruder woke up so he wouldn't see me, and certainly wouldn't know I was the neighbor. The next day, Mr. Jenkins came knocking on my door and told me what happened to the intruder. They would hold him until he admitted all the facts, and then he would most likely be sent to jail. Thank goodness, then I could sleep soundly.